Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I'm Kathy Groover, and I am so excited to welcome a very special guest today, another Santa Barbarian friend of mine, Sara Caputo, who is like the organizational productivity genius. So we are so excited to have you. Thanks for coming on, Sara. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
You bet. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into what you do, what your business is, all that good stuff.
Okay. I am a transplant from the Midwest. So born and raised in Minnesota, undergrad degree in nutrition science, moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and then moved over to Santa Barbara to go to Antioch University, where I got my master's degree in organizational psychology. So I was really interested in kind of what bridges how people think, how people put their stuff together. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I started working for a therapist, a well-known therapist, a world-renowned therapist actually that lived here. And I started helping her organize her files while I was in grad school. And I just needed kind of another job. And I've always really been drawn to organization and there's something so self-regulating about putting stuff in order. And so I started working with her, and that the word kind of spread. And, therapists tend to be so darn smart, but yet not very organized was sort of my, not to put an overall blanket judgment on that, but I ended up working for a lot of therapists, and it was really awesome. And I started getting them organized and really fell in love with organizing paper, files, systems, putting systems together, and quickly sort of realized that I had a knack for this. So I spent about 5 years doing professional organizing. I joined the National Association of Professional Organizers. I was, quickly got involved in all aspects of that. I put together an organizer's lunch here in Santa Barbara. At that time, there was a very robust group of women organizing and men doing some organizing, and we had a really nice camaraderie. And then I started to I'll never forget the day I got asked to teach a class on organization, because that is where things really shifted for me. I was about 4 years maybe into organizing, and I had hung my shingle out, and I was very busy and productive and, had a very abundant schedule of lots of clients. And at that point, I had, branched into working with all kinds of really, what I was most drawn to was people that were entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, people kind of working on their own. So they were working so much more in their business versus on their business, right? And so working on their business meant the back-end systems. It meant, what it all means for all of us when we work on our own and when we're solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. It's like we love doing what we love, but then there's all these systems. There's the admin, there's the filing, there's the structure, there's the, everything you need to sort of build a foundation so that you can do best what you do. So I started putting a class together for the county of Santa Barbara. They had a really robust employees university at the time. They still have that. They don't hire as many outside people to teach in that now. But that was my first step into teaching. And then from there, I really started working so much more in business and working with teams, working with individuals. And from that came my model that I talk about called the Productivity Puzzle. Mm-hmm. So my theory is that all of our organizational challenges come from one of 4 areas. Do you want me to go into those, or should I stop? Because I can talk nonstop for hours. So you just tell me.
Well, let me ask. Yes, I definitely, and I wrote them down, and I have drew a little diagram because I'm that girl. So here's what cracks me up, Sarah. Is Sara and I met years and years and years ago. We ended up speaking together at this little women's business breakfast thing. I talked about stress, you talked about productivity, and we kind of looked at each other and went, that's like really, we've got that synergy that everyone's talking about. And several of the things that you said even then really stood out to me. And I know we're going to talk about those later, but it's so funny that you say you loved organizing papers, and I'm a triple Capricorn. Jason and I talk about this all the time. And you give me a stack of papers to file and like alphabetize, and it's a wet dream for me. I am the happiest girl in the world. And a couple of weeks back, and I know Jason knew, I don't know if you know, my father passed away. Yeah. And so I was given the task, of course, as an only child of, okay, clean out the house. And I went, fun. And I labeled everything, and I literally in 3 days, I got this house ready. And everyone was blown. I'm like,
amazing.
I love doing this.
Yeah.
So for someone who doesn't love doing this, how do you, and then we'll get into the productivity puzzle, but how do you even get them to start these tasks? I mean, because I have so many clients who have clutter bugs and they won't, it's so overwhelming to them, they won't touch any of it. So how do you even begin to work with someone like that?
Yeah, well, if somebody calls me to get themselves organized, you know, you got to start with why. Like, there's a reason you've reached out. So either there's a life event. Very often, a life event causes people to need to get more organized. There's a death, there's a birth, there's a divorce, there's a loss, there's a natural disaster. There's something that has happened, because most people don't wake up in the morning and go, I just feel like I'm a little cluttery. I'm going to go ahead and hire somebody. I mean, some of us do that if we have the luxury to do that. But most people, it is because there is something that has pushed you into needing that or to do that. And then from there, we can find sort of the why behind that. Now, if it is truly just like, I need to get, and so where people come to me now is really, I need to get my business more organized. I need to get my systems and structures more organized, so that I can do more and have more time to do what it is that I want to do in my business, right? So same thing, we always have to go back to the why. We always have to go back to, you know, what's the purpose behind this, so that when we get frustrated and when we feel like, you know what, F this, we have something to come back to go, yeah, but remember, the goal here is to get this house sold. The goal is to have a calm, serene setting so that when you bring your baby into this environment, it's not going to be chaotic. More often than not, there's relationship problems if it's in a home. Yeah. So there's something going on within the couple. There's something going on within the family. Working with families that have kids that have, you know, any kind of like ADD, learning disabilities, anything. There's always a big why behind that. Like, let's create as little visual clutter as possible. And in order to do that, where people think we're just going to be getting rid of stuff, this is like seriously deep spiritual work. And you know, Kathy, after just cleaning out a house, like when you are getting organized on the physical level, you are clarifying priorities. Everything comes into, you know, it all is about systems and decisions. So everything is about either making a decision about something or having a system for it. And the two work together, because you can't make a decision about where to put those flip-flops if there's no shoe holder or basket under the bench by the front door, right? Like, otherwise flip-flops are going to end up everywhere. So there's got to be a system. And so that's, again, where we come back to, like, then we get into this deeper conversation about, like, let's talk about systems. Let's talk about how your home is set up. Let's talk about how your office is set up, your, you know, your business structures.
Well, so I was going to say, I thought it was interesting how you first kind of started off too, because, you know, now we're kind of to the question of, well, you know, how do you get started? You got to think about the why, right? But like you said, usually it's some life event that kind of pushes us over the edge. And it's almost like, you know, organizing, I think you said, is kind of like a therapy sort of a thing. And so again, you know, this, you know, synergy between kind of stress and everything else is hopefully people listening today don't have to wait until a major life event. But if you start even asking yourself some questions like, are you stressed out? Do you feel like your life is a little bit chaotic? You know, and if you start answering those questions, it's like, holy crap, maybe I do need to, you know, declutter, organize, get myself kind of on track, because the reason I'm feeling chaotic or that things aren't working the way they're supposed to is because I'm not organized and I'm not productive in doing what I need to do. And until I take care of that, it ain't gonna happen, right? And I've heard several different stories of people, and you probably have clients that are like this. You know, something in their personal life or their business, they're kind of stuck, and they take a day to clean out their office, and all of a sudden, like, all this new business rolls in the next week. You know, and it's like,
you open up space.
You open up that space. There's got to be something here, right? So, yeah, so don't wait for that life event. If you start feeling like you're stressed or chaotic, then do a little timeout right now and say, before it gets to that point, let's prepare so that those, when those do happen, and they will, right? That we're not as far behind as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because when those happen, and if you have called me in, and I don't actually do as much of that kind of organizing anymore, but back in the day when I did, if I was involved in your project, it probably meant there was something that had happened, and now tensions are running high. So you kind of nailed it in the sense of, I often think of myself as more of an environmental therapist in a way, because people often are working with a therapist And then that therapist is not going into the house, but I am. So I often get a disclosure to sign from the therapist, so the therapist and I can talk about what's actually going on in there, and I can tell them what's going on in the environment. So that my work has brought me into some really interesting areas in that way as well. And you know, the spectrum is, you know, I need to get more organized to hoarding. And so have worked with a few hoarders. There's some people in town that work with specifically with hoarders, and that is truly where we are off the ledge. So, you know, it's that's kind of the spectrum that you can think about when it comes to organization. Yeah.
Cool. I love that, because I am such I'm such an organizer. At least I think I am. And then you look at my stuff and go, and I assume everybody, well, no, I'm a pile maker. Piles, I can't put stuff, because if I put it away, and I remember you saying this too, like if I put things in drawers,
you'll forget about it.
I'm a visual kinesthetic. I want a pile of stuff.
Right.
I still write notes on like paper with a pen. Like I'm not,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Which I can talk about for days, because I'm on a campaign to get everybody back to pen and paper, because it is truly how our brains operate.
Yep.
And it is the best way. There's a brain to hand connection. You probably know this. The RAF part of your brain actually starts to work on things when you write them down. You don't get the same effect from thumbs or typing. Yep. So research shows you write a grocery list, you type a grocery list. The person that wrote it can actually go into the store and find 90% of what they need without even bringing the list. Pretty interesting.
Yep. As soon as
writing stuff down.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what
I'm telling you. Yeah, most of the time when I'm doing training and speaking, the biggest takeaway people have that I get emails on is people coming back to me saying, "Thank you so much for telling me it was okay to be on paper." I'm not exaggerating. Yep. There is a thing in this world, because we are so technical and digital, that everyone thinks they need to be on that for their to-do list. But the reality is a to-do list is really best on paper when it comes to the day-to-day and the week-to-week. Like, not maybe the master list, but that's a whole nother conversation. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Back on track.
It's the same thing. It's like I write stuff down and then I cross it off. And some days I do something that's not on the to-do list and I write it down just to cross it off, because I want credit for that.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
And as a visual kinesthetic, what was I going to say about affirmations? Yes. When you write affirmations, like, you know, I am prosperous and abundant, if you write it in longhand right before you go to bed, it goes straight to your subconscious.
Yep. Absolutely. There's magic here. Yes. Yeah.
Just from writing stuff down.
I want to start a podcast. I want to start a podcast called "Get Back to Paper" or something clever. Yeah, I'd need your help on that, but you know.
Yeah. Hey, we could absolutely do that. Okay, so let's talk about the productivity puzzle.
Yep.
I'm excited about this.
Okay.
Which I wrote down and put a little diagram right there. Okay. See.
Yay. Okay. So do you just want me to talk for a couple minutes about what it is and what my thoughts are on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was doing organizing, I was realizing that, you know, all of our challenges kind of could be grouped into 4 different areas. And so I turned it into this thing called the productivity puzzle. And those 4 areas are your physical space and systems, your time and calendar, your to-dos and your tasks, and planning and maintaining. Planning of your time, maintaining of your space and your systems. So the 4 work together. This is a bit of an integrated approach, because what I was finding was we couldn't just get your space physically organized, because it's definitely not going to stay that way if we don't have a plan involved on how to keep it that way. So really the maintenance piece is the most integral piece. I always tell people, like, don't even bother putting time in setting up systems if you're not going to maintain them, because it's just a waste of your energy, right? Like, if you're not going to maintain them, they're not going to stay that way. So I actually like to start with the maintenance piece first and just kind of lay that out there and say a good maintenance plan on space and systems requires a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly approach. You have to be doing something every day, something every week, something every month, and something every year, so that things don't pile up. Otherwise, we spend weekends and weekends cleaning everything out because we've ignored it, because we don't really maintain it. Just like a garden, right? We plant a garden, we got to be out there a little bit each weekend, just picking and pruning and doing a little bit of work so that it can become more abundant, and then things can grow properly, right? Otherwise, we hold off and then we have an overgrown mess, and we have to spend weeks in the garden really getting it cleaned up. Right. And we never get the fruits of the labor. So that's my sort of garden analogy. So those 4 areas work together. When I do training, and, you know, my main sort of training for employees and staff is around the productivity puzzle, because I can trace any issue that people bring up back to one of these 4 areas. You could throw anything at me and I could say, that's a time issue. We need to be blocking time out. We need to be looking at important versus urgent, right? Like I can look at, your to-do list and say, you don't have a master list. We got to have that master list. You got to have the 10,000, the 5,000 and the runway. You can't really, in the robust positions that we're in life, especially if you're running a business, one flatline Excel spreadsheet list just does not work for people. Our brains get overwhelmed, and if we don't know where to start on something, we just are going to check email because we need a win. Our brains are looking for a win, right? So anyways, I can sort of trace all of our challenges back to one of those areas, and that's how the productivity puzzle came about.
Cool. I like that you said important versus urgent. I tend to, because I have so much going on and so many things in different areas, I tend to rush through. I feel like everything's urgent. I put a timestamp on everything. And my ex-husband used to say, it's the tyranny of the urgent. You think everything is so important that you, never take a break, because you're constantly putting the same level of importance on everything, and it's not. So for someone that does that, for one of us, all of us business owners who are sitting in offices by ourselves doing everything, how do you figure out the urgent versus important?
Yeah, I think it's the visual I use is an iceberg, and on top I list out the urgent. On the bottom I list out the important, and on the top the urgent is. And I can send you that slide, and you can upload it in your show notes, because then it'll give people a good visual. But I always say to people, like, I'm not worried. I'm not concerned about the urgent. We are a world of urgency. If you didn't pay attention to urgent, you wouldn't have a job, you wouldn't have a business, because that is what your world is really made of. Where we get into trouble is the important, the stuff under the iceberg, the long-term projects, the bigger picture things, the things that require other people, things without a deadline, right? Those are the things that require us to incorporate into our time through time blocking. The tool that I always talk about here is time blocking. Doesn't mean every day has to be blocked out, minute to minute. It means looking ahead and saying, on Tuesday and Thursday, I've got to take a deep dive on this project, and I got to hyper focus on it, or it's never going to happen. So knowing what those important under the iceberg things are that linger and hang around and drive us crazy, that's the important piece, is knowing what those are. Urgent is phone calls, scheduled events, urgent matters, and meetings. Like, we know what those are, and we're good at those. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a job. So I think it's really smart to make a list and separate the two. And also, I think it's really smart for people to track their time. And I know that's one of those things they're like, I don't want to track my time. But I'll tell you, it's sort of like counting calories. You think like, I did really great today. I was about at 1,700 calories. Yeah, right. You were at like 3,500. Because we overestimate and we underestimate. We don't really know. Data doesn't lie. So I have a great tracking sheet that often, if I start working with clients and they're just like, I don't know where my time goes, I'm like, let's find out. So track your time for the week. Is it green time or is it red time? Very simple. It's either making you money or it's not making you money. And then we can kind of further assess, wow, I didn't realize I spent so much time there. The important is what is the most important thing to look at, because as Patrick Lencioni, one of my favorite authors, says, like you were saying, Kathy, if everything's important, then nothing's important, right? So we have to get better at prioritizing. And the way we do that is that fourth piece of the puzzle, taking a little bit of time to plan, knowing what's in front of us, breaking it down, the big to the small. We don't need an elephant at one time, yet we have elephants all over our daily to-do list. Like, how overwhelming does that feel? Every time you look at your list, you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to start with. I'm just going to check email, because I can at least, like, my brain feels good over here. I can get a win. I can forward something. Right?
We're laughing because we've used this.
We always have animal references, so you made the first animal reference.
And we've talked about the eating the elephant one spoonful at a time thing in so many episodes, because we know this is a huge issue for people. So I didn't mean to interrupt. Jason and I are just having a little brother-sister moment here.
Yeah, it is. It's the biggest issue. The breakdown of stuff is huge.
And again, I mean, like you said, the urgent versus the important. But I think, sometimes we think because something is urgent that it's important. So do you have any tips maybe for people too? Again, if you just kind of list down all the different things you do, you kind of referred to that red, green kind of stuff. How do people determine, what really is important? Is that like a tie back to values? Is there some kind of exercise that people need to go through? So it is. That's why I wanted to check and see, because I know we've kind of talked about that before. that, you know, when you think about your values, that's what's going to be important. And like you said, a lot of times those things we don't block out because we get so busy with everything else, but we just have to like tunnel vision for that period of time and really be true to what is important. Because I think sometimes too, the important things are probably the harder things. And sometimes those harder things we want to put off, right? So how do you kind of help your clients kind of walk through that of really separating it and, you know, getting through all that muck and say, this is what's really important. This is just urgent. If it doesn't happen, hey, it ain't going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the biggest thing is because I work with so much staff and, you know, I consider myself for the employee. So when I get brought into a team, I work with individuals within the team, usually for the leader, like, hey, I want to do this project where I want everybody to up-level their organization a bit. What I find in that is that people just are not clear on what is high priority. And that is a function of, like you said, the tie back in an organization. It's the tie back to the manager or leader, helping them prioritize, because everything starts to feel important and then nothing's important, right? Then what the story we start telling ourselves is that we're so busy and emails taking up all our time and we can never get ahead. And then that just becomes how we operate. And that is what I hear across the board. So the number one thing is stopping and getting it out of your head, brain dumping every single week, getting it out. And it seems like, okay, I know what I have to do. You know what? Shit is so much scarier when it's up in your head, and it's so much more, you cannot strategize on it. You cannot focus on anything. And when it's up there, it's just recycling and it's scarier and scarier. So getting it out of your head, listing out, make an iceberg, what's on top, what's on the bottom, because anything on the bottom has to be blocked out, has to be strategized, has to have some thought put into it. So if that's the case, then the tie back for personal, you know, for what we're doing on a personal or entrepreneurial level definitely comes from, where do I need to be spending my time? What does that master list look like for me? Where am I putting more, where do I need to be putting more energy into something rather than, and this kind of goes into top triangle, which I think we'll talk about on the next session, which is, what is the highest and best use of your time? That's a good diagnostic tool for, like, where do I absolutely know I need to be spending my time? Part of this is just getting honest with ourselves. We think we need to do it all. We feel better about ourselves when we try to do it all. But the reality is that we cannot. So I think we have to be really honest. If you work in an organization, having a one-on-one with your manager every single week is a wonderful way to say, help me continually prioritize. Your manager knows what is higher level versus lower level. And if we don't have that prioritization, we are going to burn out. And that is where 90% of people live, in that burnout rate.
Yeah. Two things that came to mind when you were talking. One of which is, there's been times where, like you said, it runs around your head. And I think I've gotten better. I pretty much overthink, I overanalyze, but I think I've kind of left that mindset. But there have been times where I'm like, oh my God, it's going to take me forever. And then you sit down and do it, you realize it's 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, crap, how did I just, you know, we overestimate how much time this stuff's going to take. And suddenly you find yourself.
Especially when it's in our head.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then the other thing is, and we've talked to Jason, I've talked about Jason, I don't think about anything. When you need to bring in help. And I've had an assistant for years, and she changes the CD in my office. She changes the sign on the ceiling. She runs my errands. She changed my sheet. She does all this stuff. And there was one day that a client came in, and he laid down on the table and he looked up, and I have a sign, because I still do massage. There's a sign on the ceiling so that when people are face up, they see a little message, a little positive thing. Yeah. And the therapist was my assistant was out of town. And so over the weekend, she didn't change the sign. And my client lays down. He's there every week, and he goes, oh, someone got lazy and didn't change the sign on the ceiling this week. Same as messages last week. And I said, oh, well, you know, my assistant's out of town. And he looks at me and he goes, you couldn't change your own sign? And I looked at him and I said,
nope.
No. I said, no. If I'm climbing around, changing the sign, changing the CD, running all my own errands, then I don't have time to return your phone call promptly. Yep. I don't have time to eat lunch. I don't have time to fucking pee. I don't have time, you know, it's like, I don't have time to do those things if I'm doing all this piddly little shit that I now pay someone else to do. And he kind of went, oh yeah, good for you. You know, so I think we have to, and it comes to those priorities. If the CEO is answering the phone rather than getting a temp that day to get the receptionist up and running, what are you doing? You know, and I think we forget those things. We forget that we have other things that we need to be doing.
Well, and because as you were talking, it's like the times when I feel stuck, for lack of a better word, right? Usually the way that I describe that is I can't get out of my head, right? Because things are just mulling over in my head. And so like you said, we've got to get that out. It's just like, our physical space, one of the four, right? It's just like decluttering our office, because those thoughts are just going around in our head. So how do you do it, right? Well, either you talk to somebody, or like you're saying there, we pick up a pen and we actually just write it all down, because it's scarier in our head than it is when we finally get it out. And once we can release it, then we're decluttering our brain. And now we can think clear and go, oh, if I do these 5 things, then it's not that big a deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And Kathy, what you said speaks to one of the biggest challenges of why people procrastinate, which is, what's the hardest part of anything? Starting. Because we feel like it's a bigger deal than it is. And I can't tell you how many times people say exactly what you said. Man, I did it. It really didn't take that long. So one of the tools I share with people is utilize the 1-minute rule and utilize the 15-minute rule as much as possible. There's 96 15-minute chunks in a day. Right? You can do so much more in 15 minutes than you think you can. So get a timer. Don't use your phone. Every time you use your phone, you look down. Oh, I have a message. Now I'm checking recipes on allrecipes.com, right? We go down these bunny trails. So get a 3-minute, get an egg timer from Target or whatever, and utilize that 15 minutes. I mean, you can plow through a lot of emails in 15 minutes. You can clean out a junk drawer. You can start a project and strategize and get the tree done. I can get 3 slides done on a PowerPoint in 15 minutes. A lot can happen. We have to just be honest with ourselves and look at where are we needing to spend our time more, because it is never, ever about getting more done. Anybody can get more done. Anybody can just froth at the mouth and keep going until midnight or 1 a.m. It is about being smart and strategic and knowing what is the highest thing for you to focus on, so you can have balance in your life. And that's the biggest challenge, is we are so dedicated to work in this country. It's frightening how much we give away to our organizations and to our jobs. I mean, I'm sitting with a girl yesterday, and she's like, well, I'm doing email now from 5 to 7 in the morning. And then I take some calls while my kids are eating breakfast, and then I get them out the door. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? First of all, don't start your workday until you're actually paid. That's ridiculous. Like, it is a problem. So I think that there's a reality to, I feel like my coaching helps people stop and take a breath and say, what do I actually need to be working on? I'm going to not check email right away. I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to eat a frog and get in there and get one of my important items started, because that momentum mentally is going to kick off your day in a much different way than being on goddamn email and going down 50 rabbit holes and solving problems for nobody that matters, because none of that is anything that's important to you. Right. So, anyway, so I feel really strongly about that, because it is soul sucking, and it is sucking the souls out of people, and it's creating insane imbalance for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that we just blew through this half an hour. Which we tend to do. Okay, so we're going to do 20,
time goes, right?
20 episodes today, just all talking to you. I just want to pick your brain. I should probably just have you come in and we'll do a session. Any final thought? I know we're going to talk about the triangle and all these other shapes next episode, but any final thought? Jason, anything you want to throw in right now? Sarah, anything that we need to, we'll wrap with?
Yeah, I want to share 2 tools, but Jason, go ahead. You share what you want, and then I'll wrap with 2 tools.
Well, no, because I was going to say, because we first started talking about organizing, and there are these 4 areas, right? The physical, your time calendar, to-do task areas, but also the maintaining. And that, again, a lot of times we don't think about that. And even though, at the beginning of this, I thought we might talk more about the physical stuff, but we ended back up here in the brain, right? Is because it's just as important for us to organize our brain as it is to organize our office. And like you said, I think, because people they're working all the time. They're focusing on all this piddly little shit that they don't need to be doing.
Yep.
That usually if we cut that out, if we dump our brain onto a piece of paper with a pen and paper, then and be clear about starting to block out some of those times, like you were talking about. Don't start your work day until your work day starts. If you're not getting paid, don't do it. and everybody's stress level is going to go way down just from that. Right. And that's just a start, because we have to focus on getting our brain organized and our physical space, and then our calendar, and then our tasks. And so it was enlightening to me, so I can get out of my own brain a little bit more myself.
Yeah, that's great. Super insightful. And I think everything starts in our brain, right? It all has to start there. So we can organize our physical space. We can feel better about that. We can block time out on the calendar for the deeper dive things, to know that we have to block our time so someone else doesn't take our time. Those boundaries are really important. Boundaries are everything to do with time management. And then, the third is get stuff out of your head, get it on paper in front of you, then organize it based around priority. And then planning and maintaining. This is, again, the biggest piece. But, 1 minute of planning saves you 10 minutes of execution. Let me say that again. 1 minute of planning saves you 10 minutes of execution. So planning ahead for tomorrow and planning ahead for next week are two of the most applicable, easy to reach tools that anybody can start with today. What that means is that you're going to do something called EWO, end your day with order. EWO. End your day with order. A simple thing. We started doing this in kindergarten. We had a cleanup time in kindergarten. Yet we leave our office space or our workspace, wherever that is, and we leave kind of a tornado behind, not just physically, but also psychically. Like we have these, vague boundaries now between work. We have lingering things. We have road rage when we head out because we didn't really wrap our day up. We got stuff that it's kind of half done, right? Then we're just waiting to plug in later so we can get more stuff done. So ending your day with order means having a hard stop to your day. If I leave the office at 5, my day ends at 4:45 or even 4:30. And I use those last 15 to 20 minutes to wrap my day up, get my list set up for the next day, revamp on what happened today, strategize for tomorrow, and just come up from the horizon and look ahead. That's on a daily basis. Getting in the habit of doing that. You already have habits set up. It's just a matter of revamping those habits and turning them into more of a positive. Then part 2 of that is the Friday 45. Using 45 minutes every Friday to look ahead down the pipeline 1 to 2 weeks. I looked ahead a couple weeks. I'm confirming meetings for next week. I mean, if I'm not looking ahead on a Friday and I have a big training on a Tuesday morning, I cannot be getting organized for that on a Monday. I got to be looking ahead on a Friday and confirming things. So it's using that time to come up from, under the surface, look up on the horizon and say, what's coming ahead at me? Where can I block time? What projects do I need to be focusing on next week? Oh, that's going to be tricky because that's right. It's just a strategic plan for your next week, but you have to have the time to do it. And I don't think Monday morning is the best time. I do think that for me, I work from my office is in my house. So for me, it's a Sunday night thing. I get my weekly list set up on Sunday. I look ahead. I'm confirming times, but I'm wrapping my week up on some level, either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So those are my last 2 tools that I think really can help, and they're easy to reach, easy to do, and then get a timer. That's the other thing.
Yeah, I love the timer thing. And one of the things that I do now when I leave my office at the end of the day is I actually strip the table and set it up for the next day. Because if something happens in the morning and I show up to my office and go, I'm not ready, then I'm a crazy person.
Yeah.
It takes me 2 minutes. Just do it before you leave. Be ready for the next day. And I write stuff on Post-it notes and I put it in my computer so that in the morning when I open up my laptop, there's a Post-it that says, these are the things I have to do today. So,
beautiful.
It's about incorporating those systems and bringing them in and setting them up.
Yeah.
And setting them up. Oh,
yeah.
So many more questions from you for next time. Okay. Sarah, why don't you tell, this is great. Okay. Because it's a triple Capricorn thing. Okay. Sarah, why don't you tell everybody how they can reach you and how they can get more of you?
Okay. My website, Sara Caputo Consulting, no H on my name, just Sara Caputo, Caputo, consulting.com. Under Thought Leadership tab, you can sign up for my shout out, and that's a once a month kind of, I do a takeaway tool. I listen to a lot of podcasts and kind of share what I'm listening to, what I'm reading, and just a fun, easy way to stay connected. And then you can always shoot me an email. I've got lots of one-page handouts, and I've got a great tools. It's a card that has all the tools that we've been talking about on it. And on the back, it's got the productivity puzzle. And I have this digitally, so I'm happy to send this. You guys can also put it in your show notes if you'd like. So
beautiful.
That can be a quick takeaway.
Yay.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Sweet.
We love takeaways. Cool. Oh, Sara, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an awesome episode. We could do this for hours. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygroover.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, start today, start tonight by planning tomorrow, and pick at least one thing that we talked about today, because there was a whole bunch to get you started to kind of declutter your brain, your area around you, and be more productive so that you can unlock more of your potential. So we'll see you on a future episode. Have a great rest of your day.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.